Alright guys, now comes the time when we have to start putting all the plugs in. So let's go to our NASA and start coming up with the plugs that we need for that. Okay guys, so now let's take our NASA GPS, let's flip this over just for a second to see where everything lines up. Find a route for our GPS wire to go, like this hole here. And we'll just pull that through, plug it into the port on the NASA that says EXP. Okay. Alright, we want to plug in probably our long cables first. And I'm going to go ahead and actually I'm going to put the gimbal in place under here. Now we don't have to line it up just yet. We can actually bolt it on top and then line up the bottom part later, which is exactly what I'm going to do to make it a bit easier to deal with. Alright, so the gimbal mounts with the 2.5 millimeter hex screws, the same ones we used to put the arms on. And we'll go ahead and thread lock them first. Always, always, always. Thread lock them first. And then we'll go ahead and put the screws in. Oops. That is on upside down. We want to use the other mounts. Alright guys, now comes the part where we mount the gimbal. Make sure your wires are properly run through the back of the gimbal. And we're going to use the 2.5 millimeter hex screws to mount the gimbal. The top holes are going to be the ones that we do first, and we're going to just do it on the top frame first and then line it up on the bottom frame. Remember, always, always, always use that thread locker. Alright, that looks like it fits a lot better. Alright, excellent. Now the gimbal has a couple of plugs that we need to put in. And those are for the roll, the pitch plug here, and the cable that comes back from the IMU, which is going to carry both the video signal and the data to the gimbal controller. Okay, excellent. All right, now only thing that we need to do is I'm going to actually go ahead and solder the camera in place with these solder pads here. Once we get everything else mounted, once we get the camera plugged in the back. Okay. So because this can play a little bit, let's wait on the soldering until we've got everything evened up where it should be. Now let's connect all these wires here from the NASA. Make sure to line up your positives and your negatives. Channel 1 is going to be aileron. Channel 2 is elevator. Channel 3 is rudder. Channel 4 is Channel 4 should be the throttle channel. There it is. Channel 5 is gimbal roll, but I'm going to go ahead and deactivate that because you really don't change the roll much, you just change the pitch. We're going to use that as our flight mode switch, which will connect to U. Channel 6 is gimbal pitch, so we're going to skip one. Channel 7 is right there, which looks like we're going to use it for X1. Now X1 is probably going to be like our fail-safe or our return to home setup. What we could also do is just leave that off and use the flight mode locked on GPS, which is really what I'm thinking about doing. And then I can use the lights on the U channel. All right. So this should be all we need to do. Now let's do a little bit of cable management and a little bit of clean up here. Get everything put into place and zip tied down, and then I'll show you guys what the next step is on. Don't forget, guys, the top and bottom link connector goes right here, and this is very, very necessary if you want your quad to operate properly. Alright guys, so it's time to put the hood on. My idea, the best way to do this would be to start with the spacers in the back and then work your way forward, kind of readjusting as you go to make sure that everything lines up properly, etc. I'll do the arm mounts last. Just doing the star pattern and thread locker every step of the way. Alright, before we move all the way forward, it's time to pop the camera in place. And that really is all there is to it. Just tuck the cables back in there, get them out of the way. And then lift up the PCB, flex it out of the way. And let the camera snap in. And alright, now as we finish putting in the screws, we'll solder that camera in also. Alright, make sure to clean up the extra thread locker. A little bit of alcohol works really well for that if you've got some. Alright guys, next step is going to be to mount the video transmitter and mount the GPS. So the GPS we can just kind of stick down a little bit of double stick tape. Thinking about putting it right there. And I missed a screw. There it goes. So yeah, just make sure this arrow faces straight forward toward the center of the copter's path of travel. We just want this absolutely as axial as possible at the front end. There we go. So that'll sit right there. We'll manage these cables a little bit later, and we'll mount the VTX. Because I'm going to be going to 1.3 and I don't have the mount yet, I would stick it up here, but I'm just going to zip tie it there until my 1.3 gear arrives, which should be in a couple of weeks. Alright, so let's get moving on that, and I'll show you what that looks like when it's done. Alright folks, time to install the radio, and that goes on quite easily with some double-sided tape. Okay, I'm using a Spectrum radio now, but I am upgrading to Easy UHF within the next week or so. Just waiting for it to get here. Alright, and remember the scheme that you had to connect the Spectrum radio to your NASA, the way you plugged it into the board on the bottom. So channel 1, I believe, is going to be aileron. So aileron, elevator, rudder, throttle, which is irritatingly back here. Alright, and then the camera roll I think is going to be going to probably gear for the lights. We can change this all around later. Camera pitch. It's going to go to aux 3 because that's the knob on my radio. That guy there will take to, well, let's say aux 1, which is probably going to be the flap channel. And now, let's see, aux 2. This one's going to be probably our software configuration channel. No, that one's going to be the camera switch. Always make sure white wire faces toward the radio. Camera switch. And to keep these all in line, just put a big zip tie around them. Alright, that's it. That should be done. Now the next step is to go ahead and do the software configuration. Alright folks, last thing we need to do with the frame is make sure that the gimbal is perfectly parallel with the frame, and then put these screws in that lock the gimbal in place. That looks right. There's one. Okay, here is the second one. And that looks like it should do it. That should be it for the frame.